Welcome, everyone. My name is Zoe Colon, and I am the Associate Director for Global Perspectives and International Initiatives at UCF. I'm also the proud Senior Advisor to the Puerto Rico Research Hub, and delighted to see so many people participating today in one of quite a few events that we have planned for Hispanic Heritage Month this year. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the director of our center, which is Dr. Fernando Rivera.
Thank you, Zoe, and thank you everyone in the audience. You're up for a wonderful panel. People that I know and trust are going to give you a great presentation. So with that, I welcome you. Like Zoe was saying, I'm Fernando Rivera. I'm a professor of sociology and director of the Puerto Rico Research Hub. Thank you for all your support, and I'm going to hand it now to Professor Katy Coronado, that is going to be in charge of this panel. So it's great to see everybody. Let's have a good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rivera and Zoe and everybody for being here with us today. As you heard, my name is Katy Coronado, but my name is Katidia, and I'm here today representing not only Global Perspectives, but also the Nicholson School of Communication and Media, where I am an associate instructor. And I'm very happy to have all of these friends and colleagues here today who represent us in media and the arts. I wrote a little something. I'm just going to tell you that, we know that in the past 20, 30 years, we've seen growth and some improvement in representation, but we also know as industry leaders, experts, academics, that it is not enough. So today we get a chance to hear from experts and from people who I admire and who I have worked closely with. And the first guest today, which I'll tell you about in a second, is not only a friend, but somebody who has made a growing impact here in Central Florida in the news industry. And we also have with us, I'll introduce you to her at last, we have with us Wanda Raimundi Ortiz, who is an artist, who is a professor, who is a wealth of information. And of course, the official titles will go as they introduce themselves. We have Dr. Gisela Carbonell, who is also one of the most respected people in this industry of arts here in Central Florida, who works for Rollins. And we have with us Bridget Snedeker, who is a producer, a news producer at one of the stations in Orlando, Florida here at WESH. And we want to make sure that we don't leave out Nancy Alvarez, who is our first speaker, who is the anchor at WFTV. So we'll start with Nancy, and then if everybody can give their brief bios, you're going to have about 2 minutes for each question. Everybody has their questions already, but I'll read real quick, talking about the Hispanic community in Central Florida. How have you seen that your work has changed? Talk briefly about that, and everybody gets about 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll go in order. The guest speakers and the panelists have their order of speaking, and then in the end, you'll have, if you're a guest, you'll have some room for questions and answers. So Nancy, welcome, and thank you for doing this. You're first.
All right, thank you so much, Katy, and thank you for this opportunity, you guys. It's great to see everyone. I recognize some names. Hi, Maria Padilla, who is one of my idols in journalism in Central Florida. I know she's on this call, and I want to give her a little shout out. So yeah, I have been covering Central Florida for 20 years. I left the market just for 3 years and then came right back. And I've covered the Hispanic community really from the start. And I just can't even begin to describe to you the magnitude of the changes that I've seen just in our community, but then also our coverage of the community. And I think that we are in the middle now of another sort of evolution. I think the pandemic was another turning point just for journalism in general in our area, but specifically to these communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic. And I think it's important that we all sort of stop and take a look and make sure that, did we cover these communities fairly? Did they get enough attention? I would say no, to be completely honest with you. I think that more could have been done, should have been done, and could still be done to properly convey the impact that this pandemic has had on minority communities. But I don't even want to use the word minority anymore when it comes to the Hispanic community in Central Florida. I don't even think it applies. We talk a lot about the growth and we talk a lot about the numbers, but I think it's time to stop talking about all that and really start reporting on what that really truly means and on the impacts that we're having economically, politically, in every aspect. And I'll share with you what I always share when I talk about my experience in covering this community, and that is my experience with Hurricane Maria. And if you are on this call and you are in charge of content or decision-making, wherever it is that you work, I hope that you listen carefully to what I'm about to say. This hurricane hit Puerto Rico. I do not work for Univision. I do not work for Telemundo. I work for the ABC affiliate in Central Florida. And I went to my bosses and said, I have to go to Puerto Rico. And I'll be honest with you when I tell you that, I was hit with some resistance, with some confusion as to why this would be such a big story, for Channel 9, because we're not a Spanish speaking station. We're not a station that serves this community. And my message was, this is our community. This isn't a separate side community. This is our whole community. And I am very proud that I was able to prove that with that coverage, because by the time it was over, and I made multiple trips to Puerto Rico during that coverage, I cannot tell you how many people would come up to me at the store, at the park, at my kids' school, wherever, and it always went like this. Thank you for going to Puerto Rico and covering the hurricane, because my kid's teacher is Puerto Rican, and we didn't know much about Puerto Rico, but now we do. Thank you for going to Puerto Rico to cover the hurricane. Our neighbors are Puerto Rican, and they were so worried about their family members, and we followed the coverage with them. Thank you for going to Puerto Rico, because my coworker at the bank is Puerto Rican, and her mom lives there and is in a nursing home. We were so worried about her. So I am so proud to report to you that a good majority of the people that came up to me with feedback on that coverage were not Hispanic. We're not Spanish speakers, because that's where we've arrived in this community. We care about each other. It's relevant. It's compelling content. It's important content to everyone, because those numbers have gotten so big and we've arrived to where we are in this community. It's a story for everyone when something happens within, about, for, by the Hispanic community. So that's something that Puerto Rico taught me. It's something I think Puerto Rico taught my station. And I'm really proud to share that with you guys, because I think it applies, really to any avenue, anywhere you work, anywhere you share space, anywhere you bring your talent. We're not a sidebar anymore. We're the whole community.
Thank you so much. Bridget, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Bridget Snedeker, and I am Latina, despite the fact that my name is Bridget Snedeker. My dad is American, but I was born in Venezuela, and I came to the United States when I was 7, and I've lived here ever since. I graduated from UCF in the spring of 2017 with a double major in broadcast journalism and Latin American studies. And right now I am the 4 p.m. producer at West 2 News, which is the NBC affiliate here in Orlando. I am the only Latina producer, and I am one of the few Latinos in my newsroom. So this is something that is very important and dear to me. I think that now with the growing Hispanic population, at least in my newsroom, much like Nancy, I don't work in a Univision or Telemundo. So I think that with the bigger community, there's been a bigger push for coverage. These news directors and reporters who, it's not that they didn't care before, but they didn't know. And now it's something that can't be ignored. They can't say, like Nancy mentioned, we're not the minority anymore. We are everywhere. In Central Florida, there's so many Hispanic Latinos, and they are our audience, They're not just turning to Univision or Telemundo. So I think that the growing population has really made people in newsrooms here, at least in mine, open their eyes and be like, okay, this is no longer a D block story. This is an A block. Like, this is important for our community and for our viewers. And I think too, it's changed my work because I've kind of taken it on my own to inform my coworkers, kind of like Nancy did, like, hey, I know we have this event happening, this Puerto Rican parade happening. It's important. We should go there. And they're like, oh, okay, sure. Like, if you say so, we believe you. And I think that those of us who are in English newsrooms have that responsibility upon us. And hopefully one day it's something that we don't have to have. But right now we do, as we kind of gather interest and get more people, to really cover these communities in the ways that they should be covered.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And next, Dr. Gisela Carbonell, Rollins Museum Art Curator. Could you please give us your take on this?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this panel and to be among people who I respect and just friends of the community here. As Katie said, my name is Gisela Carbonell. I am the curator at the Rollins Museum of Art at Rollins College, formerly known as the Cornell Fine Arts Museum. We recently changed our name. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico and went to college there, did an undergraduate degree in political science, and then went on to do my master's and PhD in art history. And I have been part of the team here at the Rollins Museum of Art since summer of 2018. And prior to that, I was a professor at the University of Puerto Rico Calle campus for about 9 years, and also worked in other museums in Florida before coming here. And one of the things that I would share with you is the expectation. I'm one of the few Puerto Ricans, I guess, who didn't have family in Orlando. I didn't really know anything about Orlando beyond the parks or that kind of misconception that a lot of people have about Central Florida. And when I was researching this institution in Central Florida, I assumed that I would find lots of people in the visual arts in leadership positions who were Latinos or Puerto Ricans. And I was surprised when doing my research, I didn't find that. So one of the things that I hope to talk a little bit more about when we go through some of our other questions today is to share a little bit about what I have been doing and how I have been working with my institution to change that, and with partners in our community like UCF, like others in our area, to change that. And one other thing I wanted to say is I agree with what Nancy and Bridget have said. It is so important to not only invite artists who are Latino or Puerto Rican, or invite speakers to some of our events or show their work, but also to have people in positions of leadership so that we can go to the upper levels of leadership in our institutions, like Bridget did and like Nancy has done, to say, this is important and this is why, right? And get their support and get them to realize how important it is to serve our communities, integrating them in the work that we do and not dictating how we do that work. And so I've been fortunate here at Rollins to have been able to achieve that and get everyone on board to create a museum that is even more inclusive than it was already what it already was when I joined in 2018, and to continue delivering on our mission as a teaching institution and as a teaching museum and a museum for all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gisela Carbonell. I can't wait to visit the museum. And next we have Wanda Raimundi Ortiz. Wanda.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Hola, Katie, Gisela, and Nancy, and everybody. What a wonderful panel. And I see all these amazing names on my screen. So thank you so much for joining. I am an associate professor at the University of Central Florida in the Studio Art Department. I am a Boogie Down New Yorican, Puerto Rican by way of the Bronx, proudly so. And I will go on and brag on myself a little bit. I'm an award-winning artist, and I've been here. I joined UCF in 2010, so this is my 11th year here at the university, and I'm particularly excited to be tenured, which means this is a rank and where you don't see many people, especially Latinos, Puerto Ricanos, first generation, in this position where you're not just in a kind of coming in teaching one class, but I have the honor and privilege of representing multiple communities here. But the thing that I find that's most impactful is that I get to work with so many young Latinos, Latinx kids from all over Central Florida, from all over Florida. People are coming from Port St. Lucie, from all different kinds of places. And what I find really exciting and important about this position for me is that I get to be an example of si se puede, right? Yes, you can make a successful life for yourself as an artist. Yes, you can make a successful life for yourself as a professor, and without compromising certain aspects of who I am and who I've been, still rocking my hoops, still keeping my New York City accent. And so I'm very proud to be able to serve the very big, the growing community of young Latinos and Latinx students that have come because of Hurricane Maria and all the other things that have happened that have made Orlando a place, a hub for this community. So I'm really glad to be here to be able to serve them and to serve you all too. So yeah.
Thank you, Wanda. And I'm going to go off of what you said. You mentioned, that you're going to brag about yourself. It's a little difficult for us sometimes to do that. And when we talk about representation, we started talking about representation. And next, I want to ask about representation in the industry. I know Nancy started off talking about some examples at her station, but I know each of us have our stories. So with us behind the scenes right now is a very close friend and colleague, Dr. Erica Rodriguez-Kite, who had no idea I was going to mention her, but she and I, we co-edited a textbook that Wanda is also a part of, basically to show that representation is important in Hispanics in media and in the arts. And so we have to brag about these things, and it's very seldom that we get the chance to do that. And I think we need to do that in our spaces, but also outside of our spaces so we can educate and inform. So next, Nancy, if you can give another example or more information about that topic, about representation that you've lived, and I know that you have a ton of information to share. So anything that you can share with us about representation.
How much time do you guys have? So I have a lot I can say about representation because, I believe in it. I think it matters. I think it's impactful. I think it means something that I am sitting there every morning, on Channel 9 on TV. And that thing we always hear about where, some little girl might walk by the TV and see me and my name ends in a Z too, and I have curly hair and she'll identify with me, and that sort of the importance of that, right? That representation. But I will tell you that it is time we stop talking about that. And it is time that we start talking more about how represented we are in places that you don't see, in places where budgets are set, where decisions are made, where promotions are decided on. I think for far too long, it's been satisfying and important, that we have been placed in positions where we are seen. But what's happening in the rooms that we don't see, right? Are we there? Are we at those in those boardrooms? And are we on those executive leadership teams? And that's, I think, where we need to start, talking more and pushing more and demanding more, honestly. And it may not be the most visual roles, but they are the most impactful ones, is the rooms where decisions are made. And that's where more of us need to be. And then also, just in terms of representation, I'll tell you, in the media in Central Florida, I also think, and Bridget may agree with me, that it's gotten to the point where now it isn't even just about representing the community, it's just about doing the news. It is very possible that on any given day, you will get to a breaking news scene in Osceola County, and the only person who saw something only speaks Spanish. It's really now just the basics of getting the job done. We had a very high profile case where a young man was gunned down on his way to school in Orange County a couple of years ago. And I remember that morning, and I remember walking out of the studio and going into the newsroom, and the only Spanish speaker in the whole newsroom was me. And I was called over to crowd around the Facebook page of his, I think it was his mother, and everybody was trying to find connections to this victim. And all the posts were in Spanish. And people were talking about him and who he was and what kind of kid he was, and they were offering condolences to his mother. And the only one who could translate this and let everybody know people were saying about this kid was me. What if I hadn't been there that day? What if I wasn't there that morning? And furthermore, I'll take it a step further and tell you that for scheduling reasons, and because I had just done the morning show, I wasn't able to go to that mother's house. I wasn't the one who knocked on her door that morning to see if she had any comment about the death of her child. But I want you to know that, I said it in my newsroom. I said, if to cover this story properly, and to cover this story the way it deserves, and to even have a chance at getting an interview with that grieving mother, you better have somebody knocking on that door who speaks her language. And even if she's bilingual, even if she speaks English, I promise you, if she is mourning her son, she wants you to speak to her in Spanish. And if you know our community, if you know our culture, you know that. And if you're prepared and you have a staff that reflects that, then you'll win. You'll win in the ratings, you'll win at the game, you win every time. It's connecting culturally and emotionally with who we are. And so those are sort of the two examples I'll give you that, why representation matters, but so does the work.
Thank you, Nancy. Bridget.
So I will pick up right where Nancy left off, because it's 100% what she's saying. It's about doing the news in our community, and I know what story she's talking about. And, there have been plenty of times where reporters have gone to stories and haven't been able to get the story or talk to the person because they didn't speak Spanish. And I think it's more, rather than covering the news and doing your job, but I think it's also a thing of respect for those people. Like Nancy said, we know our community, Latinos care about each other and respect about each other. And especially in Central Florida or just anywhere, if you meet another Latina, there's like an automatic connection. If you see a grieving mother, one mother to another, there's going to be some kind of connection. And that's important to tell. And it's an important angle to get. And I think it's when you speak in Spanish, maybe they're able to express themselves more than they would have before, or you get to learn something wonderful about the person that maybe they weren't as comfortable talking about in English. I've been very fortunate that I lived in Orlando for a while. Like I said, I graduated from UCF. So here there's a big Hispanic population. However, I grew up in a small town in Illinois, about 3,000 people, where I was the only Latina, and people weren't welcoming to me. And, there's newsrooms that are small everywhere across the US. And I have a friend who also graduated from UCF. Her name's Desiree Montilla. And she worked in Charlottesville, Virginia, and now she's in Richmond. And she's told me stories about where she goes places and people aren't as accepting as her, or there's not as many Latinas on her television. So, I think it's something we have to remember that in big cities and in Central Florida, Miami, Los Angeles, other places that are bigger markets, you're going to see those Latino names, but it's a bigger picture. It's newsrooms all across the country are still struggling with representation. And like I mentioned, for a while, I still am the only Spanish producer at my station, and we have a lot more Latinos on our staff now, which is very fortunate, and I'm very thankful, and I think they're all wonderful. And I think just diversifying your newsroom is going to diversify your coverage, it's going to diversify the people, and it's just important to represent, to be a reflection of the market that you cover. And if you're not, then how are you really going to be able to tell the stories that are out there?
Thank you very much. Doctora Carbonell.
Thank you. And I think in terms of representation, I agree with what Nancy was saying in terms of pointing out those areas where we need to be present and where decisions are made, and then do it. One of the things that I did when I started here, after realizing that no, there's not a lot of other curators or art professionals in our Central Florida museums or galleries, excuse me, who are Latino or Puerto Rican. One of the first things I did was start to ask questions, right, as I became familiar with our museum's programs and collections. And I should mention, for those who may not be as familiar with the world of art and art museums, this profession, being a museum curator, has been a profession for decades that for almost forever, that has been dominated mostly by white men. And so only in recent years, we have seen more women, and especially more women of color, be able to get to this point to become curators or museum directors or gallery directors. And that changes the way in which we approach our collections, our programming, the way in which we have the kind of sensibility and insight to identify areas in which our communities are not being served, right? Because we want the public to come to our museum and enjoy the programs and exhibitions we organize and coordinate. But if we don't speak to them in ways in which they feel welcome and they feel accepted and seen, it's not going to have the it's not going to resonate in the way that it's achieving a broader audience and a broader constituency. So in our museum, I am fortunate to work in a place where our collection, which is now almost 6,000 objects, it's pretty diverse, right? We have lots of Cuban artists and Dominican artists, South American artists, and artists from all over the world represented in the collection, but we didn't really have a substantial number of Puerto Rican artists represented. And so one of the first things I did was start asking questions. Why? Why not? And when I was hired, that was one of the first things that my director said, you know, maybe this is an area that you can develop. And so I've been working to build on three works that we had in our collection when I started here by our colleague and friend, Wanda Raimundi. And I said, okay, this will be my starting point. And I started working to build that collection. And so now we have almost 10 Puerto Rican artists from the island and the diaspora represented in our collection. We're the only museum in our area to have that. And also to coordinate and organize exhibitions featuring those works. So we have two major exhibitions now at the museum that feature Puerto Rican art brought here from the island for our communities to enjoy. And finally, on this point, I want to say, going back to one of the first, also one of the first points that Nancy mentioned, that is not enough, right? We need to have people in positions of leadership where those decisions are being made who represent our communities. So now we have two colleagues and friends from the Puerto Rican community here in Central Florida who sit on the museum's board and have been advising our leadership and working with the rest of our board to continue diversifying those efforts. So I think it's pulling from our contacts, working with our partners in other institutions to get our voices out there and to create environments that are edifying and constructive. And that's one of the things that I like about our museums and the art scene here in Central Florida is that all of our institutions complement each other. And as we partner and work with our colleagues at Orlando or at Manello or at UCF Gallery, it's about complementing each other and offering broader programming for everyone in our community.
Thank you so much. Wanda?
I would be remiss if I didn't say that I echo my colleagues' sentiments. Clearly, representation is a huge, huge reason why I took this job and I'm here at this job, and I take my position as one of 4 voices in the art department that represent the Latino community and the Black community, the everything other catch-all community that is, you know, everybody on the outside and the fringes. I take that position very seriously because I am going to be the voice at the table that's going to say, I don't know, I think we need to really think about this. I think you need to reconsider this approach. I will more often than not be on the committee that's going to be thinking about things that people are not, the things that other folks are not addressing or not thinking about. I'm going to be the person that might catch that and bring it to their attention. So this position as an associate professor who's sitting in rooms with people with different perspectives, that I can definitely at the very least represent our voice and bring that to the table. That's my job, and that's part of my job. But the thing about my job and representation, and I prefer the intimate approach, right? And so I wanted to reflect on a story that happened just recently. I was invited, again, in partnership with a university in Georgia at Columbus State University. I was giving a talk about my practice and talking about hair politics and the reason why hair features so prominently in my work. And after giving my talk and answering questions, I had this young woman, this sweet young woman, walked up to me with this beautiful head of hair. This young Puerto Rican woman who came to me and she was shaking, not shaking terribly, but like nervous, like, you know, starstruck, really sweet, choking back tears, because she said that she'd never met a Puerto Rican artist before, that she didn't know about us, right? And she's in the art department, and I'm speaking about my work and that's featured in a gallery out there. And so now she's talking to me, and it's just like, it was as if she was talking to a unicorn, right? But it was really, I remember when I had that moment. I remember when I was going through the ranks. You asked a question about whether or not there was representation in the community in my professional practice, and I know that me coming up, I didn't know that I could make art about my experience. I had very different ideas about what I thought art was supposed to be as a professional, and dare I dream to make a life of myself, you know, forging a path that I'd never seen. And then I bump into the work of Pepón Osorio, who's one of my personal heroes, and now I can call him a mentor, right? I saw his work, brought me to tears, and now fast forward some 25 years later, now I am that person for this young woman who's seeing herself reflected in my work, seeing her concerns, her fears, her anxieties reflected in my work, and also validated because of my approach, my um because of just me being who I am and not pulling any punches about who I am. There was this moment where she saw that, yes, she could do this, and she did not have to maybe tamp down her voice or alter her approach, and speak from a place of intimate and learn intimate knowledge. And so thinking about representation on the large scale, obviously I don't want to have to repeat what my colleagues said, because they say it so beautifully. I know what I see when I'm working with young kids, or I'm doing something, and all of a sudden people come up to me and say, wow, you know what, I didn't think that was possible. There's a validation to people that see themselves reflected this way. And representation is vital, not just to it's vital to the esteem, the esteem of the culture, where you can say, yeah, we count too. We count so much that people actually are willing to listen to what we have to say and consider our concerns at the table, wherever people like Nancy, Gisela, Bridget, Fernando, and all the wonderful people that are on this panel, that we're sitting here, and that we have a whole team of people behind us that we are representing. So that's very, very important.
Thank you so much, Wanda. Very, very good points, all of you. We know that you've touched on how your work is influenced by your Hispanic or Latinx backgrounds. All of us have done enough work in our industries to know that that is something that drives us in many cases, like Bridget mentioned, in the newsroom, like Nancy mentioned, and in the arts, both Dr. Carbonell and Wanda. We are leaders, we are passionate about what we do, but I'd like to know specific examples, and I'll start with myself, if that's okay. I co-host a show on PBS called Global Perspectives, and I'm very proud to say that I help the university in trying to find guests that kind of diversify that audience. And when things happen in Puerto Rico and even in Cuba, Cuba's not really covered so much, I feel a responsibility to bring that to light. And so I have to find the people, the guests, to speak with us about these topics. And although sometimes it's a big challenge, and sometimes it's a challenge to convince our colleagues or administrators this is important, much like it was to create courses at the university level, and I'll leave it there, it is something that we are driven to do by our backgrounds, by our Hispanic heritage, by our Latinx backgrounds. So I'd like to know, Nancy, can you give some examples about how your work has been influenced directly, some specific examples?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have a lot of examples actually where I have really just reached back into my upbringing and my culture and my heritage and my language, and to help me determine how to cover a story. I think one of the biggest examples of that was Pulse. And I think it's also an example of how whatever industry you're in, you don't have to make these statements in these big ways. It could be with the slightest thing. And I'll share something that happened to me. The morning after Pulse, I was on the air, I think for like 8 hours. And I happened to be on the anchor desk during that window of time when the names of the victims started to be released. And it was around that time when we started hearing the names that we all kind of made the connection that it had been Latin night at Pulse, and that the majority of the victims were Hispanic and Puerto Rican. And I was sitting on the anchor desk, once again, not at Univision or Telemundo, but you know, at the ABC affiliate in Orlando. And as those names started to be released, I don't know why. I wasn't a strategic thing. It was not planned. I just started to pronounce their names in Spanish. So I was covering the event in English, obviously, and laying out all the facts in English. But as the names kept coming in, I just started to say them in Spanish. So I would say, you know, Javier Emanuel Serrano Rosado instead of Javier Emanuel, you know, I just, as they came in, Javier Jorge Reyes. So I started to get a couple of emails asking, just no one was criticizing or anything, just asking, curious why I was pronouncing their names that way. And then I just decided, again, not planned, just complete impulse. I think it was the emotion of the morning. I decided to address it on the air. And so with my co-anchor, Jamie Holmes next to me, he kind of gave me a nod because I felt, I thought, oh, should I go there? You know, I don't know. And I did. And I addressed our viewers and I said, you may notice that I'm pronouncing their names this way. And I said, I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know if it's to comfort myself or to comfort anyone who might be watching, because I know that this morning, everyone mourning them is saying their names like that. I'm going to say their names the way their mommies and their abuelas are saying their names. And it was a moment, I think, that people, you know, remember. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. It was 100% me literally remembering what it's like to be at Latin night with my friends and thinking about how my mom would be mourning me if it had been me at Pulse that night. And she would not be talking about Nancy. She'd be talking about Nancy or Nancita. And so I went with it. I rolled with it. And I think in that way, I honored them. I honored their families. I helped them feel seen and heard. And I made like sort of that cultural connection on our air. So it doesn't always have to be these like, you know, big event, you know, things like, oh, it's Hispanic Heritage Month and we're going to do this, you know, it just in small ways, each and every day, you can live that connection and put it on display wherever it is that you work.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Well said. And I think that when you speak from the heart, like you always do on air and behind the scenes, you connect more with people, and the work makes an even bigger impact than when it's planned. Like you said, it doesn't always have to be Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you for that, Nancy. Bridget.
So on this topic, I think I have a little bit of a different perspective than some of our panelists. I really like to give back to the young Latino community as much as I can because I am young. I graduated UCF 5 minutes ago. So I think that as the children of immigrants, we feel the responsibility to make all of our parents' sacrifices worth it. And when your family moves here, has nothing, you see your parents busting every day at work and they say, all right, what do you want to do for a career? Doctor, lawyer? You're like, oh, periodista. They're like, seriously, you know? And I think we all know that this business is so hard. The pay is awful. It's hard on your mental and emotional health. Like, it really is a thing that you have to go into for passion. And Latinos don't have a lot of resources that other people do. And in internships, connections, like a lot of people can't afford to take unpaid internships. A lot of young journalists can't afford to go a summer without a paycheck. And I know that one summer, I had a lot of internships in college that were unpaid, and I worked while I was in them. So I know the struggle, but the one summer that I took an internship where I couldn't work was the worst summer of my life because I just didn't have the support that my other intern counterparts did. So I've been there. I think it's really important to try to give back to UCF as much as I can. I'm on 2 boards. I do a lot of like talkbacks with my professional fraternity. I keep in contact with the interns at the station, and my phone is always open. So I think that's always important. And if you are somebody who is in power or in a newsroom, I really encourage you to think about that and to think about just the lack of resources that some Latino families have. And it's not all of them, but it's a good amount. And think about next time you're going to do an internship. Am I going to do an internship and have a Latino student, go all summer working unpaid and struggling? Like, could you have done that when you were that age, you know? So I really want everybody to think about that and to think about how the resources just aren't there for some young Latino journalists. And it's up to the people in power to really help, I guess, build the next generation that way.
Bridget, thank you so much for that perspective about young Latinos and some of the struggles that we tend to leave out a lot of times. But I think that it's very important to keep in mind that because you give back when you're out in the industry like you have, we have that next generation that is built a lot stronger and then able to pay it forward. So thank you for that perspective and for everything that you do as well. Next, Dr. Carbonell.
Thank you. I'll share one thing here that I think has kind of helped me also on a personal level, but also as someone working in the museum and trying to drive these initiatives to incorporate and serve better our community. When I started here and started doing exhibition tours for the general public, I was very excited to talk about the artwork and the exhibitions. Of course, that's my passion. I'm an art historian and a curator, and always happy to talk about Latino artists or European artists, all of them. I just enjoy it so much. But there was always that little voice in my head saying, I could do more, I could do more. How can I do it, right? What is a missing piece here? And one of the things that I thought about and that I am grateful to the leadership of the museum for having embraced it is I said, okay, we do all these programs and tours and we bring in artists and speakers. We don't have any programming in Spanish. And I want to change that. And so I proposed to do a pilot presentation one day and see what would happen, and planned to have a coffee hour with the curator. And I did that with a group of Spanish-speaking people who were interested in it. And we did it, I think it was a Sunday afternoon. We tried it out and there was great enthusiasm for it. And people started asking me, can you do this every week or every month or on a regular schedule where we can plan to come to the museum? And the first time I did it, so we had coffee served in the lobby of the museum with 15 minutes for gathering and getting to know each other and create community. And then we would go into the galleries for a 45-minute talk in Spanish. The first time I did it, more than 30 people showed up and we didn't even have enough space. Of course, the pandemic set us back, but I have been doing this series where I've had people who have approached me after a talk and said, you know, this is my first time coming to the museum, and I'm coming because it's, you know, it's with you, we have access to you, and it's in our language, it's in Spanish, and we can talk about the art, and we can create community in that space in the gallery. So that's one of the ways in which I think I have been able to use my ability to speak Spanish and my heritage, my background, to reach to that part of the community who were not necessarily regular visitors to the museum, and now they find here a welcoming space for them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Those are very good points. And now I think that I will ask the most difficult question in a group of very successful professionals. So Nancy, what is one of your biggest accomplishments? Go.
One of my biggest accomplishments.
Besides Julia and Benjamin.
Besides my children, who I love dearly, I think one of my biggest accomplishments is staying true to myself in a business that has often tried to force me to go in a different direction or tempted me to go in a different direction. I think I have been confronted with a lot of moments and, to be honest, people and situations that have had me think, okay, wait, how should I act in this situation? How should I react in this situation? How should I deliver this story in this situation? And every single time over 20 years, I have just gone back to the foundation of who I am. And who I am is 100% a Cuban girl who was raised by Orlando and Sarah Alvarez in South Florida. And that foundation is what has carried me through in this business that so often, you know, can have people acting in ways that aren't their true self. And so I think for me, you could say it's, words or stories or things I've done, but no, it's that I've gotten this far being 100% myself and being authentic and genuine with everything I do.
Thank you so much. And before we continue, Wanda, I apologize, I didn't go to you for the last question. So can you tell us quickly what representation you have been able to implement through your Latina or Hispanic heritage, but something specific, because we know that, everybody has done so much, but if you can kind of focus on something that you can share with us specifically.
Me dejaron perdida.
Me dejé fuera, sorry.
No, so I using the arts as my platform to remind people that we are here, to remind people of the relevance of our voice, the resilience of our people in spite of being cast aside or ignored, or just so, for example, like the Exodus project that I did in Orlando was geared towards, it was a mile-long procession in the downtown Orlando area that culminated in this big Afro-Puerto Rican bombazo. And I'm gonna be that person that's gonna do this right here. I'm gonna wave my flag right here on pantalla just because I gotta do that. It was right after, it was a year and change after the hurricane, and all the major news networks were no longer talking about Puerto Rico. So anybody who was who did not have any friends or family in Puerto Rico would have thought, oh, well, the hurricane happened, the cleanup happened, and a certain individual threw paper towels in the crowd and everything is fine now. But we know that was not the case. And so I wanted to use my creative platform and my intimate knowledge of Puerto Rico, having family members there, having been to the island after the hurricane, as a way to refocus. Listen, there's still a crisis. You still have Puerto Ricanos that are living in FEMA hotels. You still have people that are being, shuttled around. They're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. They are citizens of the country, but they have no home, they have no land. And so I'm going to use this platform. I'm going to use this opportunity to create a work of art, a performance work of art that is going to attract the community, that is going to refocus, so that you can see that we are still here. There's Puerto Ricanos that are still here. We are part of that narrative. It's not just a blip on the screen. And so that, I think, is how it has worked for me, that I am in this position because I'm in this intersection of American and Puerto Riqueña that I can see and use my work in that way.
Thank you, Wanda. And since we're with you, can you tell us one of your greatest accomplishments?
Oh gosh, besides that project, which I thought was pretty
very amazing,
successful.
Yeah.
But I personally, greatest accomplishment, being commissioned by the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, right? The Smithsonian Museum, the National Portrait Gallery, to do a performance piece that was drawing attention and holding space for people of color, and creating a space for collective grief. Again, using this platform, using the artwork, the art world, my position as a maker, in order to draw attention and to hold attention. Like, it's not just enough for you to look at, I want to hold you. And so to have had that commission,
able to having been able to present to the leadership of our institution these ideas and to get them on board with the initiatives to collect art by Puerto Rican artists, to use space in the galleries to exhibit them, to invite them to give art talks. And then one of the biggest points of this initiative for me, doing the Spanish program, as I mentioned, but also incorporating two Puerto Ricans, and we have one of them here today, Dr. Fernando Rivera, as members of our board, which continues to diversify, and so in leadership and advisory positions, so that we can continue doing this work. And in going through this process, and as I said, I've only been here for 3 years, but in going through this process, I feel also all of this has helped me calibrate what my role is, how to use these resources and my platform, and also has helped me to kind of reflect on my identity as a Puerto Rican, as a Latina woman living here. Before I came here, I lived for almost 5 years and worked at another museum in Naples, Florida, where the community looks very different, sounds very different. It's a very different demographic. And so being here, I've had to kind of recalibrate where I am, what my goals are, and how I can best use this platform and the connections, the partnerships that come with it, to advance initiatives that are hopefully of consequence and substance for our community.
Thank you very much. Bridget.
You know, I actually kind of struggled with this one a little bit. I've only been in the industry for about 5 years, and I don't want to brag on myself like we were saying, but honestly, I think like my biggest accomplishment in this business was just being able to make it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, just like college was never really in the cards for me. Like it just wasn't, and especially journalism, it was a passion, but like, I never thought I could make a career out of it. So like looking back and looking at my college years and, being in the Nicholson program, which is amazing and prepares you just so great for what the real world's like. I look back to that and I remember juggling the internships, crying in Professor Cornell, Dr. Kites' office, because I just didn't know how I was going to make things work. And, I think that really scared me when I was a student and when I was younger. And I was so quiet, and now I'm the loudest voice in the newsroom because I know the importance of what it is. So, I'll look at my student loans and it hurts a little bit or a lot, but I think just the fact that like I was able to make it and now I know the struggles, and I will always be the loudest person in a newsroom to make sure that the community is represented. I think that's important to me.
Thank you, Bridget. And since you did mention Dr. Kite and myself, I will say that you are an inspiration for a lot of current students at the university and for professionals as well. And so we thank you for your hard work and for making it, because we always knew you were going to make it. But I know that we do see what you're doing, and your work is showing on the local airwaves, and sometimes your stories go national, and you're not going to stop. So felicidades and thank you. Finally, we have some time for some questions and some answers. And so if you have any questions for our panelists, you can type them in the chat, and I'd be happy to relay those questions for them directly. So anything that you have. Hector Garcia. Hello, Hector. As a recent graduate, what advice would you give to someone who's currently on the job hunt in news media, and how can one stand out to hiring managers? So that one would be for Nancy, and then for Bridget quickly.
Hello. Okay. Well, I think first and foremost, just showcasing that you're bilingual. If you are, I'm assuming you are. I think showcasing that off the bat, right off the top on your resume, on your reel is vital. I think it's so important. And then, beyond that, if, once you get in the door, ensuring, don't be shy. I mean, don't hold back. Don't water it down. Don't water it down. I'll tell you something that I always say. I think, I've worked with so many consultants over the years who have sort of tried to formulate what it is that I have, or I don't know if many of you are familiar with George Estevez, who did the news with me for a long time, and how he's at our sister station in Atlanta. And they kind of try to like put it on paper or like create, it's chifa. And I don't really know how to explain that to people that don't speak Spanish. Es la chispa esa que tenemos nosotros. Do you know what I'm talking about? Everybody nod, right? If you know what I'm talking about. Es esa chispa that Latinos have, and you can't formulate it, and you can't like put it in a bottle and sell it as a consultant. You just have it or you don't. And I think most Latinos have it. I think most Latinos that I know on this panel have it. And you will walk into a newsroom and you might feel tempted to like water down la chispa a little bit, but don't. It will only backfire like it did for George and I, because they put us together and it was too much chipa. And then they separated us because they had to put it in other places, because together it was like more than I think Orlando can handle. So they put me in the mornings, they put it in the evenings just to kind of sprinkle it. But do not water down the chipa, Zoe. That is my advice. I know, and I don't really know how to explain that in any other way. Yes, Katie, we need t-shirts. Hashtag La Chifa.
I love that. But it's so true. And I think mine kind of goes off of Nancy Hector. I mean, I've met with you one-on-one before, and we've met, and you're wonderful, and you do so much. I think two important things on the surface level, and then like one big one. Obviously, social media is so big right now. Even if like if you have like a private Instagram or Twitter or whatever, like always think that job managers can find everything somehow. And I think that carrying yourself on social media, having a professional presence really puts you above. Another thing, never be the intern in a newsroom that's quiet and just sitting around waiting for somebody to give you something. Because a lot of the times professionals are busy. You know, we have shows, we have jobs. We're not thinking ahead to kind of like give you something to do. So if you can always ask, volunteer, just be willing to learn anything and whatever you can. And be genuine. So like la chispa, don't water it down. Because this profession is really vain and very surface level, and it's also a lot about who you know. So if you're genuine in the relationships that you make, if you just reach out to a news director because you want them to know who you are and that's it, you just want a job, they'll know. Something that I did while I was job hunting that did me really well was that after each interview, I would send a handwritten thank you card to the news director that I interviewed with, just to kind of give the extra, because they see thousands of faces every day, you know? So if you can make a genuine connection with somebody, they'll remember you.
Thank you very much. I do have a question for Wanda and for Dr. Carbonell. I wonder if in your field you have had any challenges with controversial art, controversial in terms of like putting that in a parentheses or in quotes, controversial, right? And maybe convincing other people, no, this is okay. Wanda, I know your story, so if you can start, and then have Dr. Carbonell answer as well. I see your smiles, so.
Do you mean the one where if I didn't walk in the front door, I wasn't going? That story? Si no entro por la puerta, no voy. Okay. So this Exodus project that I did had this killer, you know, dique chispa. We're talking me and a 45-pound dress made entirely of debris that I recovered from Puerto Rico, flanked by pleneros and people from the community waving banners as if it was a giant parranda coming down the street. The proposal was that I was going to take everybody from the street into the front, up the front doorway of the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center. ¿Pa qué fue eso? Oh, well, was that what I don't understand. I see resistance. Well, it's just that, I mean, you have all these people with you and security. So wait, security is an issue now all of a sudden? Well, you know, if you have, so we get the badges. No, well, and then it's all that stuff, all that to say, it was a security issue. You're going to scratch the floor with that dress. So we pick up the dress. What's the problem? Se busca la vuelta. Like we're going to, and then it was this moment of, okay, hold on a second. Are you seriously asking me, a seasoned professional and a professor at the university that is basically sponsoring this event, I brought all these Puerto Ricanos, this whole thing about being kind of cast out, set aside. Are you really telling me that you want me to do this performance in the front on the grass? It's like almost 100 degrees outside, just a few blocks away from Division Street. Thinking about Celia Cruz, all the brown, Black performers that were headlining in places that had to go through the back door because they were too Black to be going through the front door with everybody else. And my very, very Afro-Puerto Rican presentation. If we could not walk in the front door, if I could not use my position to hold the doors open, actually, and figuratively hold those doors open and allow all them Puerto Ricanos who walk into the front door, I wasn't gonna do it. Absolutely not. There was no way. Because when else were you gonna have a bombazo of una música típica ahí, la lo negro, in that place? Never. Y de colmo in the DeVos ballroom, okay? So if I wasn't gonna walk into the front door and if I wasn't gonna have my people come in the front door, I see the project was not gonna be compromised, and there was no way you're gonna have me parked outside in the grass in front of that glittering tower of American excellence and opulence. A la madre. Si no entro, no voy. That story? Because there's a couple.
That story. We'll have to come back to the next panel.
Ahí está chispa, ahí está la chispa,
the next one. A la madre. Hashtag. Okay. So thank you, Wanda. We have Dr. Carbonell, and then we have another question for both of you.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question for us in the for people who work in the art scene, but I would say one of the things that I did intentionally with the first few acquisitions of work by Puerto Rican artists, and one of the first major ones was a monumental piece by Puerto Rican artist Antonio Martorell that addresses the number of deaths in Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria that were intentionally overlooked, not reported, neglected by the then governor of the island and then other authorities. And so it's a very somber piece, and it's very large. And I wanted it in a prominent place in the museum. I wanted people, when they started walking through the galleries, to see it as a focal point. And I was prepared for to address, comments from people or reactions. I knew some people would love having it there. And then, as it often happens with art, some people may have had other opinions in terms of what they were expecting or what they would want to see. And my answer to those comments and that feedback is that in the way that we present art in the museum, and my work as a curator, especially in a teaching museum, is that we don't exhibit art because it's pretty. We don't exhibit art or buy art because it's good decoration or because it costs a lot of money. We work with art and artists who mark a moment, who have something to say, who work with substance, and in the way that we exhibit, and I hope in my own curatorial practice, that we are showing work because it's important, because it has something important to say. You may like it on a personal level, or you may not. You may feel like, oh, this is something I would love to have in my home, or no, I would never have that in my home. There are works by Francisco de Goya that I would not have in my home, but I recognize and I can acknowledge and understand their historical significance. And that's what I wanted to do. And I hope that I achieved that with, for instance, that acquisition of a piece by Antonio Martorell and some others in the collection of Puerto Rican art.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have the question from Bianca Haddock. Thank you for that question. It is, how, as a spectator, can I contribute to serving and supporting the Latin American art community?
Oh, that's a great question. And thank you for your interest. And one of the ways I would say is, look for our institutions, the organizations and groups that are doing this type of work, and see what are the opportunities for people to get involved. We offer several ways for people to become involved with the museum. So check our website out, reach out to me. I'm here, we can talk, we can meet to see in which ways you can become more involved and support these initiatives in our community. But yes, we are open and accessible.
So I'm gonna jump on in here. I'm gonna plug real hard. Okay, so right now there is an exhibition in Tampa that's called Constant Storm, and it has got a seriously killer lineup of Puerto Rican artists and artistas like myself and Miguel Luciano and a bunch of other people from the diaspora, specifically focusing on artists that are from Puerto Rico addressing the idea of the hurricane. Okay, so if there are exhibitions that are out there, support them. When people are, when, and Gisela can certainly talk to this, if the curators, if they can check their metrics and say, look, this exhibition that we have that featured 3 or 4 prominent Puerto Ricanos, or this Latinx group was attended, we can look at how many people attended our exhibitions. That's going to be able to validate people like myself that want to have these exhibitions. If there's not attendance, bueno, you had that show, bueno, not that many people came, it's not that important, it's not that vital to the community. So attending that exhibition, for example, going to the museum at Rollins, and checking out the work that Gisela is doing, going to Orlando Museum and checking out the exhibitions, leaving comments in comment boxes. And it's not an accident that you don't know about the Hispanic community, community of artists, because it's not that widely disseminated here. That is a problem. That's why in my job, I am trying to make sure that I call my classes cultural spackle, because I'm trying to fill in the cracks, whatever, all the areas that I see are gaping holes in people's education, que no lo están llenando, ahí voy yo. So, you know, and so hopefully as this information gets out there, there's going to be more interest in coming to those exhibitions, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, and you know what? Follow Gisela on Instagram, follow the museum, follow me. I'm on Instagram. I answer all my little messages. If you want to know something, me pregunta, yo te digo, because I think at this point it's about being generous and making sure the word gets out there and disseminating the information so that we're not something that happens, like that's not happenstance. It's something that's occurring. We're a vital community. And if you can get to New York, if you can get to, oh my gosh, exhibition that just closed, La Trienal en el Museo del Barrio, New York. Start doing, you know, ask us questions, because I know it's a big field, but we can start to lay down breadcrumbs for you, and then you can be one of those consumers of the art world. And also in Miami right now, you go to Art Basel, see the exhibitions out there, and participate. That's another way to participate. Bueno, I'm going to mute myself on purpose, porque si no sigo por ahí para abajo.
No, it was wonderful, and I want to thank our panelists. And I also would like to mention that if you want to know more about our panelists, Zoe did place on here the group chat more information, so you can find that link. And I want to thank in particular Zoe Colon for putting this together for UCF during Hispanic Heritage Month. I know that it was a lot of work, and Dr. Fernando Rivera, who was with us earlier today. And I just want to say thank you to all of you once again for being a part of this, something very important and really a conversation that we really need to continue. Thanks again.
Please make those t-shirts.
Oh, wait. I just followed you on Instagram, Wanda, and I'm so excited of what's to come. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
This was amazing. Thank you. I laughed so much, and we have to save those hashtags. And I agree. Let's make t-shirts.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you, everyone, for UCF for the opportunity and for the invitation. I find UCF to be such a great partner for me and for us. Así que gracias a todo el mundo por la invitación y por el warmth, la calidez.
I like the Spanglish.
Thank you, Gisela. And let's try to support one another too. If you need folks from UCF to support your work, Gisela,
Thank you.
You know, I work on community partnerships, and I talk to a
Awesome.
lot of smaller grassroots Puerto Rican organizations that could go out, you know, and connect with you all as well. I'm happy
That's
to do
awesome.
that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to mention briefly, that I have found in my UCF colleagues and in other people in the community also, but especially Fernando, Wanda, other people who I've met along these 3 years, and is how the generosity in sharing contacts and sharing your network. And when we work with artists and other people in the arts, you know, it's not only about like getting an individual show in the museum. You know, it may be that an artist's work is not a good fit for my museum, but I am part of a bigger network and I know other people. And so it has happened that, you know, it may not work for our museum, but then I refer them to one of my colleagues at a different institution, or share that network and those contacts. And that way, that's one of the ways in which I find it so helpful to support each other.
Thanks again. And one final word from Miss Bridget Snedeker, since she didn't say goodbye yet, and then we will just close off and stop the recording. And thank you once again. Bridget, las últimas
las últimas palabras. I just want to say thanks. I don't know. I always love coming back to these kinds of things. They're so exciting for me. But yeah, if any of you need anything, let me know. I'm off to work now, so I may be MIA for a little bit, but also the students that are still on here, you can find me on Twitter or ask Professor Coronado, Dr. Kite, anybody for my information, and I'm more than happy to help wherever I can. So have a good rest of your, what day is it? It's Monday. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody.
It is Monday, and we had a good turnout. We still have some people. It's kind of like the after party.
There you go. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
All right, have a great